This week is going to be a very different online experience than anything we have done in the past. It is going to be a documentary interview of what God is doing in Colorado City, Arizona. Now, I want to be clear, we're not doing this to glorify Warren Jeffs or any of the evil that he committed there, but to highlight how God has taken something that was tragic, broken, and ugly, and he's restoring it for his glory and changing the lives of people. And we as a church family have an opportunity to be involved with this. Now, let me give a very simple disclaimer. This may not be suitable for young children. We're going to be dealing with some content of abuse that took place there, and you're going to hear some graphic stories that may hit some nerves. So I want to prepare you up front. I feel it's completely appropriate for middle school and high school age students. You may feel it's not right time for your middle school student, or you want to watch it first before you let them see it, which is completely all right to do. But it's going to deal with some very heavy material. I've asked my wife to host today's service because this is something that has always been on her heart. She has a heart of compassion. She's had a heart for human trafficking and sex slavery, a heart for children. And this has been one of her passions. And so she willingly agreed to lead today's service, to host the interview. And so we're going to go right now into this documentary that our team has produced on the Short Creek Dream Center.
The images look like something from a Hollywood film. Women in prairie dresses, homes that shun contemporary life, including television, popular music, the internet. No public schooling, no mingling with the outside world. For Rachel Jeffs, this was no movie. This was her life.
We were taught that the world was wicked. Everybody out here was just the most terrible people.
They call him the prophet, and what he says goes.
It was hard at first.
But Rachel says her father's rules got increasingly bizarre. She says he began banning certain foods, toys, even fun, that he forbade hugging and broke up families on a whim, and that his many brides were getting younger and younger.
It looks like a hotel you'd see on the side of a highway. Long, featureless corridors, numbers on the doors, bland decor. But for the many wives of notorious polygamist Warren Jeffs, this was home.
This room was the prayer room.
Jim Murray got an exclusive look inside the huge compound where Jeffs and his so-called sister wives lived, all 79 of them. That's right, 79 wives.
So your bedroom was on this main floor?
Yes.
Our guide was Brielle Decker, who was wife number 65.
On the chimney it says pray and obey.
Right.
And that's the message you'd see every day.
Warren Jeffs is currently serving life in prison for sexually assaulting 2 teenage girls. Before he went off to prison, this is where he lived, room 207. It was up to him to decide which of his 79 wives would spend the night with him. Right next to Jeff's door was Brielle's. Perhaps it's fitting that Brielle is trying to buy the compound. She hopes to turn it into a sanctuary for other former members of his church.
Hey Coastline family, we are so glad that you joined us today. For those of you who may not know me, my name is Amanda Jayne. My husband Aaron and I are the pastors here at Coastline Church. Today our service is going to look a little bit different, so we want to invite you to come on this journey with us. I have 2 really special guests here with me today, and I can't wait for you to meet them. So ladies, I'm so glad to have you here today. Would you like to go ahead and introduce yourselves and let everybody know a little bit about what it is that you do here?
Yes. Hey, Coastline family. My name is Angel Barnett. Luke Barnett and I pastor Dream City Church in Phoenix, Arizona. And we come from an amazing legacy and history with Pastor Tommy Barnett, starting all the Dream Center networks. And we are excited to be able to tell you about a very special Dream Center that we have brought you to today. Hi
Hi Coastline, my name is Jenna Jones and my husband and I are the executive directors of the Short Creek Dream Center and the food bank here in Colorado City and Hilldale, Utah. And we're really excited to have you on this journey to come join us and see what's transpired and what's happened in this unique community that, even though it's in Arizona and Utah, feels like you've stepped into a third world country. So we're in Jeff's house. A lot of people say he had lots of houses. This was the main one for him. So back in the day, Colorado City and Short Creek area was like the Holy Land. It was the mecca of where people wanted to be. So all of the favorites, all of the elite wanted to be here in this house. This house that we're in right now is 29,000 square feet, 44 bedrooms. It's 3 stories. We have 2 kitchens. We have almost 50 bathrooms. But we have a 2-car garage. Kind of gives you an idea of the lifestyle here. He was the only one allowed to drive and have a vehicle in his garage. So it's just kind of funny. Most 5-bedroom houses have 3-car garages. We have 44 bedrooms and 2-car garage. So just gives you an idea of what life was like here. So what we're standing in right here, this is our front entry. This is actually our front door. When Warren Jeffs lived here though, this was not the main entrance for his family. His family had to come through a kitchen door. The reason being is this was completely closed off. Why I closed this door here, that door would be closed, that you're standing in right there. This door would be closed, and then that door would be closed over there. They all had sound dampening bars. That's that silver piece on the bottom there. This was completely closed off to be like his little lair area. So families would drop off young girls here. They would come up to the front door. They would be escorted in. All of this was closed off so you couldn't see the rest of the house. And then they were told to come in here. This room, of all the rooms in the property, holds the most trauma and the most pain for most of the women in the community here. I've had girls come up to us that will literally stop at the threshold and they just stand here. And you can see the beads of sweat start and their heart's racing and they start crying. And he said, you know, are you okay? And they said, I've never had a panic attack before, but I think I'm having a panic attack. And so they would tell us the story of how behind that curtain there was a Murphy bed. And then behind this door was a hook. And so the one young lady said, I remember the hook. And for me, I'm thinking there was some like crazy hook in the middle of the ceiling. And no, it's just hidden on the back of the door and it's up really high. So they would be instructed to take their dresses off, hang it up on the hook, get on the Murphy bed. And then this was like the inspection room. So Warren Jeffs would do whatever he wanted to do to them in here. Most of the time we heard it was a lot of groping. It was a lot of body shaming. So one of the big things that he did was he would grab other women and pull them in, or other people in the house, make the woman strip down naked, and then continue to ridicule them, to point out your ears are too big, or you're too fat, or your legs are too this, and body shame them while they stood naked in front of everybody. It was a form of control and a form of brainwashing that he used over all of them. So one of the first things that we did in this room was we pulled out that Murphy bed, because we wanted that out of there. And the other thing that we did was we put in games. So now you can see that this is a game room for kids that are staying here and for kids that are part of the community. I really wanted to just change the whole dynamic of that room and make it fun, because one of the things they couldn't do was have fun. Play was actually spelled W-O-R-K. To play or to look like you were having fun was considered a sin. So kids weren't allowed to do that. So we put in air hockey, we put in ping pong, we have magnetic darts in there, just to allow a place for the kids to have fun and to completely change this room from what it was. In this house, you'll see that all 44 rooms have been adopted. So what I did was, when we came in, because we're privately funded, there's no way that I can use the money that we get to decorate and produce all of these rooms. So I put it up on Facebook as an adopt-a-room program. I did a picture of what the sad little room looked like with carpet up the walls, with an idea of what it could look like. And people came from all over the country, people we've never even met before, came and stayed with us for 3 days. They'd put together these rooms, they'd paint it, they'd decorate it, they'd furnish it. And it's amazing what's happened from that. This room has not been adopted. We are being very intentional, and we're praying about how to really transform this room so that it is for God and for His glory, and to completely take away what happened in here. So you will notice that this is original carpet on the walls. People always say, why is there carpet on the walls? Especially coming from California. I walked in, I said, that is the weirdest thing I've ever seen before. Carpet on the walls. You don't see that in San Diego. And it is because of multiple different reasons. The main reason is sound dampening, because of all the kids in the house. The second reason was that the mom said it was easier to keep clean with all the little handprints on the walls. But if you've ever tried to vacuum vertically, like it doesn't work. But the third reason is actually the most sad, and that is because of the abuse that happened in this culture. You have all of the abuses here. So you have physical abuse, you have emotional abuse, you have spiritual abuse, and you have sexual abuse. So you have all of those. There is hardly any families in this community that we've met that haven't experienced all of those traumas. So with the physical abuse side of it, they would take the kids and they would throw them up against the wall. And so the carpet was there to help protect the drywall, not to protect the kids, but to protect the drywall. Because many of the homes you go into that don't have the carpet on the walls, you'll see about this height, a bunch of holes in the walls, and that's from heads and shoulders and arms as kids just get thrown up against the wall. So the room that you're standing in right there, that's actually Warren Jeff's office. That was his private office. So everything that you did in this culture and within the church had to be approved by the prophet, by Warren Jeffs. So if you wanted to get married, if you wanted to change your job, if you wanted to do anything with your life, even what to name your child sometimes, you would have to come to the prophet. And so you'd come in here, you wouldn't be able to see the rest of the house, and you'd come into his office and he would assign you a wife, he would talk to you, he would counsel you, but everybody had to come in through here. One of the things I will tell you is that having been in the community almost 5 years now, everything that I'm able to share on the tour is from personal testimonies from other people. And that's been really important to us because we don't want to be like media and just splash a bunch of things that are kind of hearsay. This has been multiple accounts from multiple people telling us these stories, and everybody's experience is different. So a lot of times we'll get stories where they'll say, well, that didn't happen to me. I wasn't thrown up against the wall. But we have 5 other women that said that did happen in their family. And so it's all very personal stories that we're able to glean from people that they're able to share with us when they come in. Now, when you walk through, you'll be able to see that pretty much everything has been transformed, which has been great because that's part of the healing process. Many times people say, how can you do a recovery center when this is the place that most of the trauma happened? Right. And so one of the big things for us was to be able to change what the whole feel of this house looked like as a part of healing, as a part of that transformation. So one of the biggest things that I get from people and the biggest compliments is when people from the community that have been here walk in the house and they say, oh, it just feels so different. Yeah. It just feels happy. What did you do? What happened? I say, I know. You know, we've got Christian music playing. We got kids running up and down the halls. We've got happiness. We've got love. We have the Holy Spirit in here. That has completely changed the dynamic of this house, and that's part of their healing. So most people know of Short Creek and Colorado City from the news and from their infamous prophet, Warren Jeffs, who is currently serving life in prison plus 20 years in a Texas state penitentiary for marrying and sexually abusing underage girls, some as young as 12 years old. Now, what happens with our story is that so many people got involved in the media and everything that happened here and all the news stories when he went to prison, and everybody got upset about what he was involved in and what this community was involved in and what was happening here. And then he went to prison and everyone said, oh, he's in prison, so everything is fixed now. Everything is better. And that is just so far from the truth. So what we're going to share with you today is that that's not what happened. He didn't go to jail and everything fixed here. For anybody who is familiar with war-torn countries and refugees, that's what we're dealing with here. We have a community that has been ravaged and destroyed from a religious war. And because of that, the outcome now is a community of religious refugees.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, a lot of people just think that once you remove the head that the whole thing falls apart, and that's so not true. Could you explain just a little bit to us about the dynamic of the people that actually were left over? Because I know there are refugees and then there's people that have come in from the outside, but there's still very much this group of his loyal followers. And what is that dynamic like, and what is the need that has created that has left the city where it is today?
That's a great question, Amanda. So what we're seeing that, one of the big topics and the hot buzzwords right now, people talk about human trafficking and what that looks like. And it's been so stigmatized in all of the media and the movies, is that human trafficking looks a certain way. And what most people have a hard time understanding is when we look at what you call the dynamics here and the culture of what happened here, it's actually a form form of systemic human trafficking and human exploitation to the likes of what most people aren't talking about and haven't seen before. I mean, this is young girls, 12, 13, 14 years old, being traded to older men in the church as a prize. They're being traded to other prophets in Canada and other religious groups that are around town here and within the state of Utah. And then you have children being pulled out of schools. Schools actually shut down. No education, being forced to work in fields, being forced to work alongside their parents with no hope of dreaming. The girls are brought up to bred children, and they're breeding, and that's all that they're meant to do, and that's the only way they get a chance at salvation. And the boys just follow in the fathers and the grandfathers and everyone's footsteps in doing construction or masonry. Nobody has an opportunity to dream, which is one of the basis of the Dream Center. I mean, we're the Dream Center. That's what we are here. And people know of the Dream Centers and what they do, but understanding that living up to the motto, find a need and fill it, find a hurt and heal it, takes on so many different aspects here when we're talking about human trafficking and sexual exploitation and human exploitation and all the different facets that go with that in helping a community as a whole heal from complex trauma like that. This is the second kitchen on the property. This is just an extra staff kitchen. When the house was originally built, it was half this size. It was built in late 1999, early 2000. But when Warren Jeffs' father, Rulon Jeffs, who was the prophet before him, passed away, Warren Jeffs then married the majority of his father's wives, including his own biological mother. And when he did that, he needed more space. So he added on to the house. So we have a much bigger kitchen. It's a commercial restaurant grade kitchen that's on the other side of the house. Once this was no longer the main kitchen, it became the canning kitchen. So most of the wives had a job that they were assigned to do. So you were a caretaker, you were a cook, you were a gardener, and that's all you could do all day long. So the women that were canners spent a lot of time in here. You can see our kitchen counters. It had a lot of wear on it. Women spent a lot of time in this kitchen. Then I'll show you our two-car garage, our huge two-car garage. Two-car garage doesn't really help us much in a big facility like this, so instead we have transformed it into a full working gym. We feel that exercise is really important for recovery, rehabilitation, for anxiety, for depression, you name it. It's a very important part of somebody's recovery process, and we're really excited to have that room there and have that gym available. And then I'll show you, this room is one of my favorite rooms. This is the sensory room. This was created with a psychologist down in Phoenix. One of the main reasons that we needed this room is with polygamy and with what happened here, there's a lot of really close inbreeding, which is a really hard thing to say and to talk about. Yeah. But when you have really close, marrying and having children, what's happened is that there's actual disease from the 80s that they named polygamous Downs. Mm-hmm. And it has really huge rates of stillborn. We have physical deformities, we have mental deformities, we have a lot of autism and on the spectrum, and we have a lot of ADD and anxiety and depression and high suicide rates. And so having a room like this is really key for us, because we have the different size weighted blankets in here to help with kids and with moms be able to come in. They can curl up on the fuzzy blankets. We have the bubble wall that goes up with the different colors, and they can sit and just calm down with that. We have a sand therapy tray here. We've got a wave machine that's for noise and different smells that we can pump out. We have all the fidget spinner toys here that they can play with. We have art therapy down here. We even have bubble wrap, because that helps a lot with anxiety or ADD. I even have people that have given me fabric swatches, because some of the kids with autism, they just like to feel things. And so it's very calming and soothing for them to just sit and feel those things. So our counselors are able to come in here. If kids are acting up, if moms are having a problem, they come in here. And I had a 6-year-old boy that has autism, was here with our summer program, and one of the counselors with them was just having a rough time, and he wasn't calming down. Brought him in here. This room was only done for 24 hours. They just finished it. Came in here, put the weighted blanket on him, gave him a fabric swatch, turned the bubble wall on. Within 2 minutes, the counselor said he was a totally different child. I mean, just eyes changed, whole demeanor changed. It really does work. So this has been a huge, huge addition for us, and very useful. And then this is the chapel. Welcome to Dream City Church, Colorado City.
Yeah.
So you notice it doesn't really look like a traditional church in here. We did that on purpose. Church is a bad word. Church is what abused them. And when you talk about church, it has a different meaning for them. It's not a building that they go into on Sunday to worship. Church is what took their family away. Church is what raped them. Church is what took, everything away from them and destroyed their life. So that's why we call it the chapel here. And that's also why we have the chairs here, is so that it looks inviting. If it looked like a regular church with pews in it, it would be a trigger for them. When we are a trauma recovery center, we cannot bring people in and have them immediately triggered by something. The other part about it is being trauma informed and having trauma informed care. You also have to understand that just sometimes close proximity and sitting next to somebody could also be a trigger and could flare up. If you've had a tremendous amount of complex sexual trauma, then having that space is even important for that. So a lot of thought went into how we constructed this room so that it wasn't a trigger, but it could still bring the message. It could still bring the word. We could be able to have conversations like when they ask us why you raise your hand when you sing. What's Easter? What's a salvation? Who is Jesus? Those are all the questions that they don't really know. And so having a place to have that opportunity that's a safe spot and that is inviting to them is really important. And it's really made a big difference for us. And it doesn't hurt to have that amazing view up there. Right. Yes. All right. So this room, the room that we're standing in, it's actually one of the smallest rooms in the compound. This is Warren Jeff's bedroom. Many people are shocked by that. They're expecting this big fancy suite in here. But he said he wanted the smallest room because he wanted people to think he was humble. I didn't get that from him at all. But he also has the sound dampening bar on the bottom of the door there. Every bedroom, bathroom, and hallway has intercom system and speakers in it. The reason he did that is whenever he spoke, you had to stop and listen to it no matter where you were, even if you were in the bathroom. His is different. His is the only one with an on-off switch. He was the only one ever allowed to speak through it. The other thing is right behind you there is a phone jack that still has labeled on their security. They say it's in his handwriting, but he was able to link in all of the security calls to this room. And then the houses were not built to code here at all. So we had to do all of the sprinklers. We had to put all the smoke detectors. We had to put everything in there. When they were up in the attic, they called me and they said, "You're never going to believe what we found." And I said, "What? Like a dead body?" I mean, you never know. I mean, I wouldn't put it past him. He said, "No, every room had multiple AV video wires coming into that. And they were all linked to one spot so that he could watch." I mean, we never found any cameras, but they said every room had multiple AV video wires coming in it. Now, almost every room here has an ensuite bathroom, so his is no exception. His had an extra large tub and a higher shower head because he was so tall. Many people don't want to go in there. Look, he's brave enough. Your pastor's brave enough to go in there. I usually joke with people and say, don't worry, he's in prison in Texas for life. He's not hiding in the bathroom. But one of the things with this room is nobody wanted to stay in this room. Can't imagine why. So we were able to transform it into the conference room and also the counseling room. So this is one of the main rooms. So when they adopted it, they did a really great job of kind of making it more peaceful. I've had people in here for counseling. We have 69 people in regular complex trauma counseling right now. And they'll come into this room and they know what room it is. They've been in here when it was Warren Jeff's bedroom. And they say they don't even remember that it's his bedroom. It's changed so much and the feel is so different. And that's a really great testimony for really changing the transformation of this house. So this was his main house. This is where, his wives lived and his children lived and he lived. This was the holy place. This was the Mecca where everybody wanted to live with him. And the fact that we love to tell the story that this is an incredible, resounding message of hope, that what man built for evil, God intends for good, and that this was the epicenter of evil. And if God can do something amazing with this, think of what he can do in your life. Think of what he can do in your family's life. That no matter how bad it is right now, no matter what you're going through, no matter what's happened in your life, God can and wants to do something beautiful with it. And that's an amazing story to be able to share. And I got to tell you, if we had more time, I'd tell you the whole amazing story of how God brought this Dream Center to be. It wasn't my husband and I. It wasn't the Barnetts, as amazing as they are. It wasn't Dream City Church. It wasn't just one person that put this together. And that's how you you know that it's God. It was Warren Jeff's 65th wife who was awarded this property, who I became friends with when I was asked to do her bridal shower, had never met her before, had this conversation, toured this property. We joked about, wouldn't it be a great dream center? Because my husband and I had taken a tour of the dream center a week beforehand, and all of these pieces kind of came together. So one day, Brian Steele, who's the executive director of the Phoenix Dream Center, called us and said, I heard you have a property that might make a great dream center. And 4 months later, we actually had this property as a dream center for this community, specifically built for and put together for these moms, these women, these single moms with multiple children, 9+ children, who are coming out of these polygamous relationships, who are, you know, single moms, husbands sent away to repent, no education, no ability to dream, and have a place for them to have a safe landing, a safe refuge, to get tools and resources to really have an amazing life for them and their children. I love this space. So this is the Women and Children Lounge. Again, another very intentional move, because the women that are coming out of these situations, because they've had so much abuse, that we know that there's main areas on the floor that they can be a part of, but we wanted this to be the safe place for them. So if they don't want to be around men or other people that are on the property, they have this place. So we set it up as a little education area, a group setting there. We have a living room, and then of course the little tot area, the little kids corner. That was really important to us. Polygamy breeds children. So most of the moms that we're working with have 9+ children, and they're single moms. A lot of them have started having babies when they were just 15 years old. And then this room behind you here, this is our art therapy room. This room is special because for generations, they grew up being told that doctors were bad, government was bad, psychiatrists, shrinks were bad. So they don't actively seek out counseling usually. So we try to find other ways to kind of bring them out of their shell and start to talk about those different emotions, and at least start having those conversations with them. Art therapy has been huge for us. So every single cabinet in here is labeled with some form of artistic, whatever they want to do. I mean, it's from sewing to painting to sketching to drawing to Play-Doh to glitter, whatever it is, we have it in here so that they can come, and it's a form of art therapy for them to do it on their own. And then one of the biggest requested things that the community asks me to do is do art therapy classes. So it's a really great way to kind of talk about emotions. We use balloons to talk about anger. We do, you know, sketch outlines to, you know, help with self-esteem and self-identity, because they struggle with all of that. So art has been a tremendous form of therapy for this community, and this is just a great room to spend time in for them. So I'll just show you real quickly down this hall here. This is our short-term emergency temporary crisis wing. When we first opened up, we had a mom at 2 o'clock in the morning show up on our doorstep with 12 kids. Came out of a polygamous relationship, was able to take all of her children. And of course, when you have 12 kids, where are you gonna go? Right. It's not like you can just crash at somebody's house. Even the shelter that's an hour away couldn't take them. So we said we will always have a space for something like that in the middle of the night crisis situation. So these 2 rooms were done for the mamas, and they are big enough and were donated with pack and plays and little cribs you can see in there. And then these 2 rooms next to them were done for the children. So the moms can stay there, have their own space, and the children also have a space that's designated just for them. The hard part about trauma and for children being torn out of situations and the whole idea of being traded around and transferred and moved around is they never had a place just for them, and they weren't allowed to play and be kids either. So being able to have a space that was welcoming for them while in the midst of turmoil and chaos and transition in their life was really important for us as well. So this is a little Monsters Inc. theme. This one's a little Lion King theme room, all done with really intended for children, small size furniture, all of the toys, games, stuffed animals you could think of. And then we have another laundry area separate just for them. So they really have their own wing to be here and feel comfortable, but still come down for family style meals, still come down and be a part of the classes, but feel like they have their own space right when they come in going through something like that. For all the room adoptions, when they were adopted, I named them and then gave them a corresponding Bible verse or an inspirational quote, and then thanked whoever did the adoption there. So all of the rooms are labeled with that as a thanks to all the different teams that came out. And you know, we get a lot of flack, usually from other Christians, that we let so many different people in to adopt these rooms. We've let people who are complete atheists called me and said, I don't believe in anything, I hate God, but I love what you're doing here. I want to be a part of it. I've had people from the LDS church, I've had every denomination, I've had book clubs, I mean, you name it. We've had the people here that stay with us for 3 days. And that becomes part of the ministry, because now these people who believe that they're atheists or don't believe in anything or have different beliefs from us now have a footprint in this Christian organization, and they're forever part of it. And they got to hear the story, and they got to be a part of this journey. And that's been part of the ministry too, which has been really exciting. So there's a butterfly theme room and a gecko theme room there.
So when his wives were here, did their children live in the rooms with them?
That is a perfect question. We're leading right to that right now. So as we walk up the steps, that's the new addition of the house. So if you can imagine, that was the old house, how it was originally built. This is the new addition. And I'll show you in the new addition something that they added. These rooms here.
Okay.
These are baby suites. They have a slanted sink, so you can bathe the baby right in the sink. There's a heat lamp right above the little changing table, and then there was a little night light in here too. Now when you look at it, you think, gosh, I wish I had one when my daughter was a baby, or you know, when I had kids, because that's a really great idea, they're having the baby suite. But then you find out that it wasn't intended for the biological mom with their own children. He would determine who would tend the children and take care of them. Yeah. So the moms would be placed in here with probably somebody else's baby. And they took it even further than that, is that we have heard that they would take the babies and have them breastfeed off of other mothers, so they didn't form a maternal bond with that parent. So the hard part for us is that when we first came in, it's really overwhelming. Where do you start? Where do you start with all of this? Because the boys were taken away, and the dads would take the boys and say, this is what you're not supposed to do, and then sexually molest them and abuse them. That boy would grow up and then do it to his children. It became a generational abuse problem. So you have the boys that were taken away. The girls, 9, 10, and 11 years old, were taken in the middle of the night with gunny sacks over their head to this location that's just right down the street here as a form of wife training. They would take them and put them in this white room and do whatever they wanted to do, and the male leaders of the church. And then once they'd done it a couple times, they would have those girls stand around, the new girls that would come in, and they would do this until they started menstruating. Once they started menstruating, they were then old enough to be married off and to be able to produce children, which was their main goal in life. So these girls from 9, 10, 11 are sexually molested and then traded as a form of human trafficking and used in that purpose once they started menstruating to, you know, the oldest men in the church usually, because she was a prize at that point. And so you start thinking about, when do they ever learn love? When do they ever learn trust and bonding? And so, you know, Glenn and I and our family, before the Dream Center even came to be here, that was our thing, is we started looking at people going, gosh, when do they learn that love? And where do we start? Because it's so overwhelming. Well, we can love people. And that's kind of been the core, is, you know, building that trust, that consistency over time, that bond that they haven't shared with people, and trying to show them what God's love looks like. Because how are they ever going to understand God's love, God's agape love, if they don't understand just basic relational love first? And that's something that we all can do. So we start there.
So coming into this community, when you have a group of people who grew up, you know, being told one thing, and that everybody from the outside were bad. I know they had this, what they called the God Squad, people that literally, if outsiders came in, that they would follow you around, intimidate you to the point where they would chase you out of town. So I think it's really important that we know, how did you get your foot in the door? How did you get these people who have been told their whole lives that you were the enemy to open up their hearts and their city and to let you guys in? How did that happen?
It's really baby steps. So you start with really the basic needs, meeting basic needs, and showing God's love in a very practical way was really important for us, because they didn't know about God's love.
Right.
They knew about the hate and the pain because they were religiously abused, but they didn't know God's love. So being able to take those little steps and showing consistency with trust over time and meeting some of those basic needs. You can imagine when you have complex trauma and you've been through generations of trauma and abuse, you're in that fight or flight mode, and you're just in survival mode. Yeah. And so if you can come to a point where where you can meet some of their basic needs, it helps relieve some of that stress, and then they start to trust you at the same time. And so with that, we were able to purchase a food bank here. So we have an additional building here in town that's a huge food bank warehouse. We started out with just serving about 1,000 people a month, and now we're doing 1,200 people each day. We're open twice a week, every week, and in a 2-hour period, we can go through 1,200 people, 1,700 kids we're feeding. Just since COVID started in March, we have fed, let's see, it was 1,080,000 pounds of food. Wow. To this community just since March.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but you even have people who are still serving Warren Jeffs that come to your food bank and get food from you guys too, is that correct?
Slowly but surely we're gaining that trust with them, because they believe that our buildings, if they're not living in them anymore, if FLDS are not living in them, it's been stolen from them. And so it's actually a sin for them to come receive food from us. Wow. So we were setting up special hidden locations basically to get them food in areas that they felt safe. And we were doing that by the thousands. Now they're slowly coming to the food bank because we're doing drive-through model with COVID. And so now they're starting to come in and get their food that way. It's been amazing. I mean, just in May, we fed 8,700 people. And to give you a perspective, that doesn't sound like a lot, but this is a town of just under 10,000 people.
No, that is a huge amount. Yeah. And I love that, even taking those baby steps, that you're even reaching the people who are not actively trying to be reached, who are 100% against being reached, and that God is opening those doors slowly but surely. And that's how, like you said, it's baby steps. Yes. And I just really am going to believe with you guys that God is going to open that door, and that we're going to see the whole town, that the followers, the non-followers, the people who have been cast out, you know, that they're all going to come back to Christ, to the true Christ, and not live under that condemnation that they grew up in.
So I don't know if you've ever heard of Parade of Homes. They go in and tour the big fancy homes. So when the majority of our rooms were done, we did a parade of rooms. We invited the community in. Because of the stigma that this is the prophet's house, we wanted to start kind of building some camaraderie with the community. So we did the parade of rooms, invited people to come out. We did little ballots so they could vote on their favorite room, and we had some hors d'oeuvres and stuff, and it was so much fun. So the reason I tell you that is this one favorite girl room. You can go in and see they make this into a Parisian dressing room. So it's quite fancy. They were one of the first ones to redo the flooring for us, which made a big difference. So we had a young lady that was in the FLDS. We were contacted. She asked us to help her escape from her family. If you've seen anything like Escaping Polygamy or any of those documentaries, that's exactly what this situation was like. Mom and dad were not happy. It was a surprise to them that she was leaving. She was in her 20s, so she was early 20s, so she was able to do that. But they showed up, and the father pushed me. They threatened the police officer that we had there keeping the peace. It was a very scary situation. But when we got her out of that home and that environment, we allowed her to pick which room she wanted to be in. And she said, I've always wanted to travel and go to Paris. And so she stayed here. The first night, she washed her hair. She put on different clothes. She came down and had dinner with us. She's now doing amazing, but she spent some time here, and she said she loved this room because after what she went through, it gave her hope and made her feel like she was in a totally different world, which was incredible to be able to give her that right away. So this is the bottom floor. When Warren Jeffs lived here, there was a couple different things happen on this floor. So one, we heard that the spirited wives were sent down here, and I always joke that spirited wives would have been Angel and myself. Yes. Glenn always pumps me. Yeah, there's always a husband on the tour that's like, hey, honey, you would have been down here. And the spirited wife, I say, is more the modern day woman. Had an opinion, maybe had a voice, didn't always do what she was told to do, and so she was banished down here. The other thing that we heard was when his sons were here, when they lived on the property, he would banish the boys, and that was his word, not my word, down on this floor. So what would happen is they were not allowed to communicate or interact with anybody else in the property. Even if their biological mom was here on the property, they weren't allowed to communicate with her. There was one mother caretaker that was also sent on this floor to watch over them, and that was the only communication that they could have with any sisters, mothers, anybody else in the house. So they literally were banished down here to this floor. Now I'll show you a couple of different things. We have a couple crazy things on this floor here. This is the first one here. This is one of the communication rooms. Lots of wires, doesn't look all that exciting. When we hooked up our Wi-Fi here, the guy came out to do the Wi-Fi, and he's looking at the wires and he's looking at Glenn, And he's looking at the wires and he's looking at my husband, and he did it a couple times, and finally he said, "What do you guys do here?" And so Glenn explained it to him, and the guy says, "So that doesn't explain why your wires are tapped. These were phone lines, incoming and outgoing, that are tapped." And then these, he holds up these, he says, "Do you know what these are? These are underground fiber optic cables creating their own intranet to avoid the internet and the FCC or anybody reading their emails." There's 5 of them. One went all the way down to St. George, which is an hour away. One went to the marshal's office, which is our law enforcement, our police force here. One went to City Hall. One went to his dad's house. And one went to the meeting house, which was their church building, all so that they could communicate, which actually is illegal to be able to create your own intranet to do that. But that's how much work went into that they were creating their own underground fiber optic intranet systems. So I've done this tour multiple times. I had one group of people. I had a very large group with me one time, and there was one lady that stood right here, and as soon as I said that, she burst into tears, sobbing. So I had to send the rest of the group away, and I said, what's going on? And then she said, "That's how they knew." She just kept saying it, "That's how they knew. That's how they knew." I'm like, "Who knew?" And she said that she lived here on the property. She was kicked out of the church. In church, they made her stand up in front of everybody, 10,000 people. This meeting house holds 10,000 people. Made her stand up in front of everybody and announced that she had committed an unforgivable sin, that she was talking to a boy. And she said, nobody knew I was talking to a boy. She never saw him. She never told anybody about him. She never did any type of public interaction with him. The only thing that she had was secret phone conversations while she was living here. And she said that they pulled her up and kicked her out and said she committed this unforgivable sin and was told to leave her parents, her family, her house behind, everything that she'd ever known, and that she had lost her salvation. And that God was mad at her because God gave him this revelation that she had done this. And she said there's no other way he could have known, but it was God basically tattling on me. And so she sat there with me and she said, when I heard that, she looks at me and she says, "Do you think maybe God really doesn't hate me?" But it's those kinds of, I mean, we have those probably once a week where people come to us and say those things. We found out that they were not only tapping their phone lines, but they were reading their mail, that they would send somebody to the post office to go get everybody's mail and then open it and read it and then have these revelations from God that nobody else could know because they were reading their mail. And people are just now coming in and finding out about it. So I'll just show you this real quick. This is our nuclear reactor room. I call it the nuclear reactor because I think you pretty much have to have a couple degrees to be able to figure all this stuff out. So this is water softener, water filtration, reverse osmosis, heater, furnace. That's the drain from our commercial kitchen sink. It is pretty heavy duty. This is the main one, although we have a couple of these to run this big facility. But when we first moved in here, it was just Glenn, my husband, and myself and our teenage daughter. And we were trying to figure out how everything worked. And we were up to like 3 o'clock in the morning and water's shooting out here and air conditioning doesn't work here and furnace doesn't work here. So just trying to figure it all out. So that's why I call it the nuclear reactor.
How up to code was this?
What was that?
How up to code was this room when you?
Nothing is up to code here. No, absolutely nothing is up to code.
Everything was, they're going to put the screws to us, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when we first turned on the taps, the water came out was like Coca-Cola. Oh. It looked like Coca-Cola because that's what you don't drink the water here. I mean, luckily this was the prophet's house, and so they had lots of filters in it that we were able to get up and working again, but that's what the water looks like even here in this town. Everybody has to go up to Maxwell Park where there's these old-fashioned water pumps that get natural spring water that comes from the mountains right beside us, and that's what everybody drinks because you don't drink the water here. Yeah. So, did you guys notice the numbers on the doors? Everybody notice those? So that was not from us. That is still from Warren Jeffs. The reason he did that is he numbered the wives, he numbered the compounds, and he numbered the rooms. He did this so that he could say 16, 24, R17, and that means wife 16 goes in room 24 in R17, which was the compound code for YFC Ranch in Texas. And he did that based on how many driving hours it was from the Holy Land, which was here. So you have R21 is the one in Colorado, and he had different numbers as code so that he could communicate with everybody. Now, most of the time I tell that story and people say, they get really upset because the women were just given numbers and referred to as numbers. But I've had people on the tour from the community with me that said they didn't just number the wives. They numbered all of us. So there was a whole caste system and a whole elite system that they came in and gave everybody numbers. And the worst part was Warren Jeffs actually ordered for all the families to be interviewed. And then he would say, you're in, you're out, you're out, you're out. So you're the only one that's in now. You now have to make a whole nother kitchen onto your house because your food can't touch anybody else's food in the house. You can go to the Bishop's Storehouse and get your food. From there, everybody else has to fend for themselves. If you have children, you cannot make them food anymore. You cannot give them your food. You cannot share it with them. You have to go to special meetings and not tell anybody what you're doing. And so imagine for these kids that they were the only ones that were chosen and their families are not. Now they get food and their family doesn't. They have to go to secret meetings and not tell their parents what's going on. It was another form of control and to keep, parents and kids and not have that bond and to have no trust. Because now who do you trust? Because now you're elite and you're in this system and you would have a different number. So let's say you would go to the Bishop's Storehouse and you had an elite number. And let's say your sister would go to the Bishop's Storehouse and she had a different number. They'd give you milk and they wouldn't give her milk. I had moms that would come and say they got rice and baby food to feed their family of 20 on for a month. But then other moms got 12 gallons of milk and meat and whatever they wanted, all based upon that caste system and the number system. So you were given a number. I've had people come to me and say, my number is so embedded into my brain, it's like brainwashed in me, that I use it for my bank PIN code and I use it for all my passwords because it's the one number I know I'm never going to forget because it was ingrained in me from when I was little. So they're just referred to as numbers. So this room has some significant meaning here. I'll have you come in. I was contacted by one of Warren Jeff's sons when we first did the adoption announcement. And he said, look, I hate my father. I hate God. I hate religion, but I really love what you're doing with my father's house. Can I adopt a room? And I said, absolutely. So he said, the only catch is it has to be on this floor. He was the one that told me he was banished to this floor when he lived here. And I said, okay, so I randomly selected this room, sent him the measurements and the dimensions. He designed it. 3 months later, he came to do the work. He stops right at the foot of the door when I bring him here and he drops everything and he gets in my face. He goes, are you kidding me? And I said, what? And he goes, that's not funny. How did you know? And I said, how did I know what? He said, this was my mother's room. How did you know? So his biological mother has been missing for 15 years. The last time he saw her was in this house, in this room. And he said, I have been searching for her. I've been spending my life trying to find her and search for her, and I haven't been able to find her. Nobody knows where she is. She's missing along with the other 82 wives that nobody knows where they are. And he said, this was her room. So he started crying. I said, are you going to be okay? And he says, yeah. And I said, look, I know you told me you don't believe anything, but there's a reason I randomly select. I have 44 rooms to choose from. I randomly select this room for you. And he goes, I know. So he comes in and he does this room and he spent 3 days with us. We had some amazing conversations. He was the first one to ever tell me God raped me. Because Warren Jeffs said he was God and he was this mouthpiece of God, and then he would molest and rape people. So we actually have people in the community that physically think God raped them and can't move past that. So we had some amazing conversations with him while he was here, and we just have such a heart for him. So when he was done with the room, he called me and he's like, come here, I want to show you. So he shows me this room and he says, my mom's favorite color was green. She loved everything plants and she was the main landscaper and gardener. Everything pretty much that's planted here, every tree, every rose bush was planted by him and by her together. And so I said, this really was dedicated to your mom. I mean, before he even knew this was his mom's room, this was designed and done up, and this is all the supplies that he brought. His friend hand painted that in 4 hours. 4 hours. 4 hours, isn't that amazing? Hand painted that. So we had some amazing experiences with him. I guess when he left, he put on social media his personal experience of what it was like. I mean, he was in here ripping out the carpet on his knees of his mom's room, just crying. I mean, just therapeutic, just kind of going through the motions of all of that. And when he posted on it, somebody sent him a picture of his mom with him when he was a baby to him so that he could have it, because when you leave or when you're kicked out or you're banished, you don't get to take pictures, you don't get to take mementos. So most of the time people leave with nothing. They don't have any memory of that. So he was thrilled to be able to get that. Unfortunately, a year later, one of his friends showed up on our doorstep and she had told me that he had taken his life, that he had committed suicide. He was never able to really get the help from mass amounts of years of trauma 26. And abuse. I think I read it. Yeah. So that day we actually picked a rose from the first rose bush that he and his mom planted together, and we placed it in here. And I can't bring myself to pull that rose out, just in honor of him and what you can just imagine. I mean, just from the 3 days I had with him, the struggle and the pain that he endured and that he went through. And the sad part is that the friend told me that when news got out of him passing, the mom surfaced. Yeah, it's absolutely heartbreaking.
You know, I've always really had a heart for human trafficking, and of course, like you said, a lot of people don't understand that human trafficking isn't just in third world countries, or that kids are kidnapped and sold into slavery, which happens, but that it's also systemic, and that it's gone on for generation to generation, and that these poor girls and boys were taken out of their home and given to men in their community and then traded back and forth, and it turns into this cycle, and then they grow up taught that to just have children, and then they do the same thing to their children. It's human trafficking in a way that I don't think that most people can even comprehend that happens. Absolutely. And so I know my struggle with it has always been, well, what do I do? Because I mean, of course, we all want to go in guns blazing to these places and just pull these kids out, but I mean, we all know that's not possible. So I think the struggle that I've always had is, what as a person in ministry who, you know, is just in my normal local church, or a woman in a community who's being a mom to my kids, what is it that can we do? And I think that brings me to you, Angel, is that how you've given up so much of your time and so much of your life to this place. And I love that. And I think your message is so inspiring to tell people how it is that you really came to give so much of yourself here, and what they can do. Right. And what that looks like.
She's our angel.
That's higher to live up to. Okay, too much. Well, let me tell you where it all started. When Dream City knew that we took on Short Creek as a dream center, we knew that the task was going to be huge. Brian Steele, the director down at the Phoenix Dream Center, had a lot more on his plate at that time, and I really could see and feel the pressure within his life. And I went up to him one day and I said, Brian, what can I do to help you? He goes, well, I think he was being sarcastic. He said, you know, I could use 30,000 square feet of carpet. I'm like, okay, that's a task. That's something I can do. I went out and found it. I raised the money for it. I got a group of contractors from the Phoenix area to jump on board. I make a joke because it was like Noah's Ark. It's like you put a bunch of contractors who are leaders in one room. I'm thinking, this is like all these wild animals that are going to tear each other apart. I said, God, this has got to be like the ark. You're going to have to make them get along with each other. And they did, and it was incredible. And we came up here, and the first thing that needed to happen were, because this is now a place of healing, the triggers needed to go away. That green carpet, which you see in this room, needed to be pulled down. We needed to change the triggers, and the house that was once used to entrap all of these women is now going to be a place of healing. And I felt like something as simple as renovating was a part of the healing process. So, you know, I then saw upon Brian Steele's the pressure of the fundraising, and every time I'd pick up the phone to him and say, Brian, we need a forklift for the food bank, and we need this and we need that. And I said to myself, I have to stop. I have to stop asking for more. I have to be a part of the problem solving. How can I, and be careful when you position yourself that way, because people will freely give that to you, which he did. And very quickly I became really a version of Brian Steele. It is now on my plate to be the chief fundraiser and the storyteller, because this is not just a Colorado City, Utah, Arizona problem. This is a national problem. The world has fed off of the 6 stories that the media has brought to them for years. It is now time for the world, the nation, to jump behind this city. People would ask, why should we care about the people in this city? Because it is on our domestic soil, and it is at the level of a third world country, and is unacceptable to forget a group of people. And God cares so much for this group of people that he is rallying a team of people around this. This isn't us. This is God setting this up. And the neat thing about this project is that all people of all walks of life get to be involved. God has brought people like Barry Goldwater Jr., congressman he used to be a congressman in California, but he now resides in Arizona. Really, his family is royalty in Arizona. aligning with this man has opened up doors of opportunity. He's gotten me in with Attorney General Sean Reyes, the Attorney General in Arizona, the DOJ. They have linked relationships with the local law enforcement here so that they are no longer forgotten. We're building the relationships. We're getting funding. They're getting training. They're not the butt of anyone's jokes anymore. They are partnering to make a difference so that this town knows that law and order exists under our nation's practices, not the Warren Jeffs practices. So we partnered with men who have airplanes. They were so geographically gridlocked up here and isolated. How do we get business people and people up here who can make a difference? How do we get them here? They're not going to take 3 days off to travel and see and then go back home. So we have had amazing men donate their planes and their pilots and some pay for fuel. We need more of that because that has got people up here already. We work with women who are empty nest syndrome, but they used to be educators. Those people are gold because the need for education, vocational training, job placement. We are right now searching for factories and companies that would come up here under the opportunity zone and be able to offer assembly line opportunities. We could put 2,000 single moms to work, and we need to bring in daycare opportunities simultaneously so we can put these women to work. This will revolutionize this town. So jobs, education, vocational training, trauma counseling, at the core and the foundation, the center of it all is the Dream Center. So yes, for some reason, I could not get these people off my skin. As soon as I met them, heard the story, it was my holy unrest moment. And all of us at different seasons of our lives will come in contact with that unholy rest moment. And when every person has it, and what you walked through in life shaped you, the experiences that came into your life, your testimony will lead you to the thing that you can't stand the most. Is it extreme poverty? Is it injustice? Is it human trafficking, abortion? Is it what gets under your skin to the point you can't stop thinking about it? That is probably your holy unrest. And don't give up on finding that, because at every season of life, early in life or later in life, God has a plan. And the women that I respect the most right now in my life are the women in their 50s, 60s, and 70s, because I'm right behind them, still making a difference in this world. I don't care if they are donating an hour to something. It shows me that this world and this life is not about my comfort and what I want, because that is so shallow and vain and it will bring you no happiness. But to be involved in something bigger than yourself is an adventurous, exciting life, and I have never been more fulfilled. Have I ever been more scared? Never. But that is okay. John 4:4 says, greater is he that is in you than he that is in the world. The world is not going to have your back. Only God will. So let me tell you, align yourself with your holy unrest and what God is calling you to do. So, Coastline Church, whether this be a project you feel like you want to align yourself with, or whatever God is calling you to do, that is what today is about. Maybe opening up a thought or a feeling and diving into that and finding what your holy unrest is. You have pastors who lead you, and they're mountain movers and earth shakers. You have fearless leaders, and they are challenging you to get involved, because they know the difference that it will bring so much life to you and those that are watching you, because people watch, and you can lead just by doing, not so much talking. Let's lead by what we do.
Pastor Aaron, I'll have you come in here. So it's our supply closet. People have been generous to donate to us. So we have this side for all girls and moms and babies, and we have this side for all boys and older boys, and then we have hygiene products in here. One of the biggest things about this closet is that people always told us that there were so many records that Warren Jeffs had to keep. So because of polygamy, the first wife is the legal wife. That's the only record. Every wife thereafter is a celestial wife. So there's no public record of that. They're not legally married. So when those wives would have babies, they'd mark on the birth certificate father unknown, because otherwise that would flag polygamy. So the perk of that was that they would get deadbeat dad extra funds from the government, and they figured out how to use that situation. But they had to have record of everybody that had a baby with the dad. nobody owned their own house in town. All the houses were owned by the church, by the trust. So they determined whose house you would live in. So they would literally say, okay, you get to live in this house. If you were seen unworthy, they would have crews, families, little kids get woken up in the middle of the night to go into the house, pack them up, move them into a lesser worthy home, move another family into that house that was more deserving at that point, all before the community woke up in the morning. So they would determine whose house would live in. So he had to have record of that, who lived in what house. The other part is they call them Velcro families, and that's a term that the community uses quite often here. And that's because for a husband, so Pastor Aaron, you're wearing short sleeve. If you wore a short sleeve, you showed skin and didn't have your long sleeve button down on, that'd be considered a sin and rebellious against the church. Your wife would be taken away from you, reassigned to another husband, her last name changed. Your children would all be taken and scattered to other families, reassigned to them. Their last names would be changed. You would then be sent away to repent, told that if you ever contacted or tried to contact your wife or your children again, you lost your salvation, but you'd also force them to lose their salvation and they would go to hell as well. So you don't even try to reach out to them. You, as the wife, now if that next husband screwed up, you would be reassigned yet again to another husband, which is a form of human trafficking that many people don't talk about. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that as a young woman, you could be traded to other prophets. So there were 15-year-old girls that were taken in a truck bed up to Canada and given to Winston Blackmore, the prophet up there, as he then traded 3 young girls for Warren Jeffs. When they got to be 18, they were too old and sent back, and new girls, younger girls, were sent up to them. Another form of human trafficking that most people aren't talking about. Everybody thinks of the traditional movie image of what human trafficking is, and this is systemic human trafficking and human exploitation, and it's the girls, and it's the kids, and it's the men as well. So all of that record. Then we knew that Warren Jeffs was uber paranoid. Uber paranoid. He has tunnels, he has secret hiding places all over the town. There's little caves and secret areas. So when we got this house, everybody said this was the room that the records were kept in. And I thought, it's not very secure. We put the lock on the door there until we have a secret room. So you can come in here. This is directly below the front porch where we started. You can see how thick the wall is. I mean, this is bunker military style. He had it built so he can lock himself in. There's little shelving right there on the bottom. You can see there's one little label left that says costume hats. There was another one when we first got the house that said wigs and disguises. So he would come in, close the door, get a wig, get a disguise, come in here and either hide out and hunker down. And then we were told that underneath this, in the floor, was a tunnel that went up to his dad's house. So he can come in here, get his wigs, go in the tunnel, be up to his dad's house, and escape, and nobody would even know. No, it's just right behind us. It's right behind our compound here. That's still his original safe. There was nothing in it when we got it. We were told that there was probably a gun cabinet right where you're standing, Pastor. And then these are his original shelving units here. The interesting part is when he started building YFC Ranch in Texas, that was going to be the new Mecca, the new Holy Land. So they transferred everything from here over there, and that was right before the big raid happened. So it was actually really great timing because they were able to have all the records there when they did that raid, and a lot of the stuff that they found there was able to help prosecute him because now he's serving life plus 20 years in Texas State Penitentiary.
Religious brainwashing, yeah.
All right, so out here, obviously this is part of the property. When we got this house, there was no basketball hoop here. There were the pavement part, there was a pavement part here, but no basketball hoops. So in the early 2000s, when Warren Jeffs started all of his edicts, when he shut down schools, he said no dogs, no color red, no toys, no sports, no games, no fun. He actually had this built as a basketball court, and then he ordered the basketball hoops to be removed. I mean, shaved down to absolutely nothing here. There's still pictures you can find on the internet of the main highway that goes through here. When they were told to get rid of their toys, they stacked them up on the highway. So the whole highway was littered with games and stuffed animals and bikes and toys. It's an eerie, eerie picture to be able to look back at it. But one of the things here in the community is there wasn't much for the kids to do. And so we started helping with putting on little, basketball leagues and coaching for them. So all the kids were coming over here and practicing on our little, temporary one there, the sand one there. And some donors at Dream City Church found out about it and gave us the funds to be able to put the basketball hoops back in. So we randomly selected a local gentleman to come out and put them in for us. Turned out to be the original guy that put them in for Warren Jeffs. Also the guy that had to come and cut them down. He had just gotten out of the FLDS, and so he came back and was putting these back together. He actually built them the exact way that they were for Warren Jeffs when he originally did it. And as he was putting the last of the netting up on that one, the kids were coming over to start their practice. And so he did a couple hoops with them, and right where that red truck is, he sat there with his truck and he sobbed the entire time watching the kids play. And I went over to him and I asked him how he was doing, and he said, in all my years, in my lifetime, I never thought I'd see kids playing and having fun and laughing. He said, especially not on this property. He said, you have no idea what this did for my heart. He said, can I come back? So for a while, he was coming back every day when the kids were practicing, just so that he can experience that kind of joy that he hadn't seen. And then we have brick buildings. We have these two little brick buildings here. That one on my left there is a generator building. And then this one was just a storage building and then a secondary generator in the back. But this one here, the bigger one with the double white doors, we found out that there were 3 punishment rooms on the property. So this is basically a garage. There's no running water in there. There's no bathroom. There's no heat. There's no air. It's a concrete floor with lights. And that's basically all it is. We had a wife and one of the children here tell me that they were banished out there for up to 30 days. Someone would come out and tell them when it was okay to come in and eat. Someone would come out and tell them when it was okay to use the bathroom, when they can shower, and then they had to go right back into the punishment room. And one of the boys said that he was sent out there because he told one of the mothers no. And then one of the wives was sent out there because she did the laundry wrong and wore the wrong color socks. That was it. That was the form of punishment. So we found one in our house, the room that was built for, the house that was built for his brother, and it's downstairs in the basement. It's a little storage room, but the lock is opposite, the door handle's opposite. So when we went to move things in, Glenn's like, that's really weird. He got a really weird vibe from it. One of the wives that lived in that house came back and asked us for a tour if she could walk back through it as part of her healing. So when we walked with her, Glenn asked her about the room. And he said, so this lock is really weird. And she said, oh, that was the punishment room. And he kind of looked at her shocked, and she said, what? She was surprised that he looked at her shocked. And she said, what, you don't use it for Jenna? And he's like, no, I don't use it for Jenna. But she was confused at why we weren't using it and why he was shocked by it, because she spent time in there, and that's totally normal for her. She's out. She doesn't follow Warren Jeffs anymore, and that was totally normal for her to have a punishment room. And it was for the wives to be taken away from their biological children. That's their form of punishment, while somebody else took care of them. Unbelievable, isn't it? And then the whole compound, you can see our brick wall here. It goes a full city block all the way down and around. This was completely closed off because it was the Jeffs block. Only his family was here. So you have his dad's house that was above. You have his house here. That was a mother and a brother's house, and then a couple other brothers' houses there. He went so far as the public road, the city road right here that runs parallel to us. He actually had it barricaded off. He had it fenced off so that nobody could get close to his house. It was probably about a year after we opened that they cut down that fence and finally opened up the public street. He had it closed off. But what's interesting is I tell Angel when we got that other property there, because we just bought that house right next door there to be able to open up as part of the Dream Center ministry here. And when we did that, I said, you realize now we own half of Warren Jeffs' block. We own half of Dream City Church, and Dream Center owns half of Warren Jeffs' block. That's amazing. I said, what's going to stop there? We're going to own the whole thing. We're going to take it all for Jesus. We're going to take it all back and reclaim it. So pretty exciting. That's another big house, about 8,200 square feet, 13 bedrooms, and that gives us more space to be able to house more people, to be able to take on mission teams to come out and serve with us, to be able to take on more staffing, to leave more rooms here, to take on more women and children. So it's a wonderful extension of the ministry here. All right, we're going back inside. All right. This is the last room. So this was this sacred holy prayer room. This is the last room on the property that has the sound dampening bars on the bottom there. When Warren Jeffs lived here, he had it all closed off and didn't allow anybody in here. This was his sacred holy prayer room that nobody was allowed into. When he went to prison, he then opened it up, and this became the prayer room for the women and the children here. So it was said that from the time they woke up in the morning, every hour on the hour, the women and the children had to gather and come in here, get down on their hands and knees, put up their hands, and recite a prayer that he wrote for them to say. Most of the time it was to him. But the women would tell me about how tiring it was. I mean, you can imagine how exhausting that is. Can you imagine stopping every hour on the hour and gathering up all the children and coming in here and getting down on your hands and knees and then reciting prayers that he wrote for you to say. And then he would call from prison and you'd have to stop that and get up and everyone would have to huddle around and listen to what he would have to say. And then you have to cut that off and try to get the children to the restroom and then back in here on their hands and knees. And then you get in trouble for not finishing your work duties for that day. I mean, they talk about just how exhausting and how tiring it was. So this room here, we completely transformed it. We had a group come in. So this is our main library. This serves multi-purpose needs for us. So we do summer school in here. We do after school tutoring. We do remedial tutoring in here. We do resume writing. We do GED classes in here. We have Sunday school in here. It really is kind of a multi-purpose place for us. That's built in. That was here originally. So that's our bookshelf. We have computers that were donated to be able to do this. We have different education items. There's just always such a need for these kids. What I love about this room is that when we have those big events, when we have those big dinners and we have those outreaches that we do, the kids are in here, they're everywhere. I mean, you have to literally go like this to step over kids because they're all over the floor playing Uno and headbands games and Battleship and card games. And the little ones are in here. We have boxes of Legos and we'll have VeggieTales on the movie, or we'll put on old Disney classics. And all of a sudden you look around and go, where'd the parents go? Can't find any of the adults anywhere because they're all in here watching the classic Disney movies because they didn't grow up with it. I had one mom, she's like, this is hilarious. What is this? I'm like, Little Mermaid? I mean, nobody knew what that was because they didn't grow up with it. They didn't experience it. And to see the joy on the moms' faces for something that simple, they'd literally kicked their kids out. And they were sitting here watching the movie. They're like, go outside and play. And they just have so much fun and so much joy. I'll have grown men stand in the hallway while we have these events and they'll just cry. Just watching kids playing and having fun again. It's just, there's little things that you go into the ministry and you go into the Dream Center knowing you're going to be intentional about, and then there's other things that just God allows to happen naturally just by being here, by being that presence, and by allowing that opportunity to see different things than they've ever seen before. And you know, I love to share it with people because I always say it's this incredible message of hope. That what man created for evil, God intends for good. This was the epicenter of evil for so many people. I mean, some of the most heinous evil that you could ever think of, this is the epicenter of it. This is where it happened. And if God can transform this, if he can make something beautiful and something healing of this, it gives people hope for no matter what's happening in your life, that God can do something amazing with it. Not just for people from the community, but for people who visit, people who come in for tours. It's just a resounding message of hope that we are so blessed and so humbled to be a part of all of that.
Just in closing, if there was like a challenge that you could give just the lay person who's, you know, living their life going on, but wants to help, what would be that challenge that you give to those people?
Well, listen, the beauty is that everyone has a skill and a talent and a gift, and the smallest thing is what we need. The largest thing is what we need, and everything in the middle. So, I mean, if you're a contractor, if you're an educator, all of it applies. And this is the beauty in working with people of all facets of life, because it's a beautiful puzzle. And everyone is a part of the piece. So reach out to the website and Jenna will correspond with you, investigate, ask questions, because my goodness, we want to turn our kitchen into a culinary certification, vocational training. And so agriculture, we need people who know how to do farming, who want to give us seed and landscaping. There is not a person or a place that does not apply to this project, because the Dream Center normally does what it does. We now have to address the environment, the social situation surrounding the Dream Center, which does not exist. So this applies to legislation, this applies to law enforcement, this education. This is a city we are trying to change for the God's glory. So it's not even just the Dream Center. So we need an army to do it with dignity and grace and love. We do not want to ever set the people up to fail. We want to always set them up to succeed, and their challenges are greater than we have time to Blaine, but we would love to get factory. If there is a factory owner that was willing to take a risk and bring assembly line opportunity, this is a game changer. And I know that's a big request, but it goes from the smallest to the greatest of our needs.
And don't forget the non-sexy stuff, like the lights.
Please.
Like the water bill for a 44-bedroom house and moms with 12 kids.
Operational costs, you guys.
Yes.
$10 a month. Praise the Lord.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Everything is important.
It's huge.
It's whatever's on your heart. What is your calling? What are you feeling? And sometimes our lives are so busy that we can't always hear, and we don't always know what God wants us to do. So I would say that my challenge would be to allow yourself that time and that opportunity to quiet yourself, to actually be able to hear the small whisper of God's voice guiding you and directing you, and that's when you'll know.
It's so good.
Well, thank you ladies so much for joining us today and letting us come through your home and see everything that you guys are doing, and for just encouraging our church to really get out there and to do something, you know, and to really look into what's happening in our world and how we can make a difference.
Well, thank you for coming. We appreciate it.
It's an honor to be here.
Thank you.
I'm excited to see how I can get more involved.
Great.
Thank you.
I love it.
And this reminder was posted everywhere. Pray and obey. As a little girl, I loved to play with dolls until the prophet declared that all toys were forbidden. But I secretly kept a doll. I always felt a little guilty about that. All of us girls were taught two main things. One, shun the outside world. It was wicked. And two, keep sweet, because it pleased Heavenly Father. We weren't allowed to show or even feel anger or jealousy, and disobedience was met with harsh punishment. We lived in fear, so we learned to be submissive and keep sweet. One day, my mother sat me down with important news. The prophet had chosen me to be his next wife. Mother said it was a happy day, but in her eyes, I saw this deep sadness come over her, and I wondered why. Being chosen to be a sister wife felt like God himself had shined down this special light on me to fulfill this divine calling. However, at 13 years old, I was terrified. I was still a little girl with a doll. I wasn't ready to be a wife. And when it was my turn to be with him, I felt such shame that I remembered to keep sweet. It's now been 10 years since the prophet moved away, and many of the sister wives have found the courage to speak up about the abuse we suffered. They moved away and they don't think or dress like this anymore. But I'm stuck. I'm angry, and I can't keep sweet anymore. Behind this door, he stole my childhood. He taught us to shun the outside because it was evil, but the real evil was inside, in room 207. I was never allowed to think for myself, but now I have to make a choice. I want to leave this dress behind and let my hair down and find the real me. The only way to do that is to forgive him. Despite being hurt and deceived and betrayed, the only way to freedom is to walk through this door. The door of forgiveness.
Now, I know most of you, after watching this special, are thinking to yourself, what can I do? How can I be involved? What action can I take about what I just witnessed and what I just experienced? Well, there are three ways we're asking you to get involved as a church family. The first is to give financially to what God is doing, not just through the Short Creek Dream Center, but how he's transforming an entire city that's going to have a reverberating effect around our nation and the nations close to us, Canada and Mexico. We as a church are going to be giving a love offering, and I'm asking you as a church family to give on top of what we have already planned on giving. You can go to our giving platform online through our app or website, and you'll see a place for Short Creek Dream Center. 100% of what you give is going to go directly to the work of what Jenna and Glenn and the Dream Center team are doing in Colorado City, Arizona. The second way we're going to ask you to consider getting involved is we as a church family are going to do a mission trip to the Short Creek Dream Center. We're going to go for 3 to 5 days, and we're going to work everything from home renovation projects to doing laundry for mothers with 20 children at home to serving in the community through food outreach. There's a place for everybody 15 years old and older. So you can right now sign up for an interest list that we are forming at serve@coastlinechurch.org. And then finally, allow this seed to permeate in your heart. The reason we did the message this weekend is we wanted to give you a vision for what God is going to do at Coastline Church here in our community. I believe that we are going to acquire a property somewhere outside of our city, Escondido or Valley Center, a ranch compound where we can rescue people from human trafficking and sex slavery and provide all of the mental health care, the trauma care, the medical care, the rehabilitation they need to restore lives that have been robbed and broken. And so we wanted you to see this because this is where we're going as a church family. If God could do it for them, God can do it for us. And we can build our own facility right here through our church family to reach people in our community. So you can hold this in your heart and pray with me and believe with me. And when the time comes, let's take steps together to see this developed in our community.